Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War objectives for the Tentacle event in which the Wall of Tentacles is added to the game. We have quite a few things happening this week, so let's get into all of that. As far as the troop itself, it is pretty amazing, as well as the arcane. Green-purple is used primarily for all of the many troops that have empowered. Probably one of the most useful ones that have recently been added being the Leprechaun, that has the explosion and gold gain from immediately. But almost every single green-purple with empowered is useful, so it is a good idea to get pretty much all of them traded. It is the cheapest you'll ever be able to get this trade stone at 200 glory each, since it gives 2 every 400, so definitely a good time to stock up if you haven't done that yet at all. As far as the Wall of Tentacles itself, it is quite unique in that it's still similar to all the other walls, all the other 10 mana cost troops that basically give like 5 mana to all other allies, gains a bunch of armor, and sometimes does something else. It's pretty much the exact same as that, except it's the highest rarity one that's ever been added to the game, so it's actually pretty decent. One of the biggest benefits that this gives it is it uses 2 mana costs instead of 1, which none of the other walls currently do. So that alone makes it pretty good. It's an epic rarity, so it is a little bit more expensive to trait, but does have okay traits, in that it can entangle every single time it takes skulls, and whenever they're not entangled, it has 25% skull reflect, both of which are decent. But as far as the ability itself, it's pretty decent, given that it's 10 mana cost with the 2 split colors, making it even easier to obtain. It gives a bunch of armor to itself with a decent boost ratio per daemon, meaning it'll just gain 2 on itself automatically. So that'd be up to 27, an additional 2 for each one. So a little bit of extra armor with it. But the 2 main things that make it good is that it gives a little bit of magic to all other allies, as well as the fact that it just has the standard 5 mana. The 2 magic in particular is going to be pretty nice, because every single time you keep stacking that over and over again, you're going to be getting quite a bit of damage onto your AoE weapon. In the case of, let's say, like a triple team, if you're using triple Wall of Tentacles, that would end up being 6 additional magic every single time before you give that weapon more mana. And generally, if you're giving a 15 mana cost weapon a bunch of mana, it's going to be one that hits all enemies, so that's an additional 24 damage potentially every single cycle. And that'll just keep stacking and stacking to another 24 every single additional time that you end up casting it, since you'd have to go through 3 tentacles every single time. But yeah, it's pretty decent. It's going to be able to rack up a lot more additional damage, and it's pretty much just going to be used with anything that is good magic boost ratio with a 15 mana cost are the main things that you would end up using this with. You can use simply one of them on basically any team as well, and use it as either a alternative frontline tank, or just have it on the team because why not? But overall, I don't think it's going to be like extremely game breaking, but it's definitely a pretty decent troop to mess around with. Anyways, as far as event objective related stuff, we have 10% to all Kerkroth, 10% to all Construct. This affects almost nothing. I think there's like 2 or 3 within the kingdom that have that. Luckily, the wall is one of them, the tentacle thing. You do gain 40 souls in PvP and Explorer if you happen to use it. Not really worth going out of your way though for it, just because 40 souls is pretty trivial. And as far as the event, really easy. All you have to do is kill a bunch of yellow enemies, specifically in PvP. It doesn't have the Explorer option this time around, but it's still pretty decently easy to do, especially if people actually bother to set yellows on their defend team. And you'll get a bunch of event keys that you'll be able to use into the future, as well as 90 gems that you could put towards the event that this Friday. As far as the keys, we have pretty horrible keys. One thing I should mention, as I mentioned in the last Kerkroth event, is that there is no Mythic within this event key drop table. Technically, Zugoth is a Mythic from Kerkroth, but it is impossible to get them from any other means other than crafting it. So don't bother spending event keys, as the drop table is abysmally bad. There is no point whatsoever in opening event keys this week. It is a 100% waste, so do not do that. We are, however, getting a new Mythic this Friday, which will be in Glory Gem Guild and VIP chests. So we have that to look forward to. But as far as the event key drop table this week, there are 0 Mythics, so don't even bother. And every other drop that you would get are pretty low tier stuff. Oddly enough, that Wall of Tentacles is probably one of the best things from the kingdom, and you can just buy that with glory. Anyways, let's go over the guild-related stuff. We, of course, have Tower of Doom. I do want to really briefly explain this game mode again, as it is still relatively new. We haven't even gone through every color yet. This is, I believe, the 4th Tower of Doom, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, so quick recap. It is kind of like Delves, except it's not Delves. Essentially, you get to choose between these 4 rooms. You have no clue what these 4 rooms are, but it's the same throughout your entire guild. So if you go and communicate with your guild, you're going to be able to know basically what each room is. There are 5 rooms that you need to basically report back to your guild, 4 or 5, depends how you look at it. The main one is the unlock room. This is basically the room that allows you to move forward. Every single floor has one of these, and that's what every single one of these right numbers are. This is the system I use for my particular guild, though you could use anything that you want. But basically, the left number is whatever the floor is, and the right number is the room that we actually have to do. So this 1, 3 basically just means that on floor 1, we need to do floor number 3 to unlock the unlock. So we would fight this battle, get the unlock, then we fight the Doom battle, kill that out, and then we move on to the next floor. So we basically just have to keep doing that over and over again. And communicating with your guild is important because every single room, unlike delves, every single room you do wastes 1 sigil. So you want to waste as minimal sigils as you possibly can. As far as all these other markings, there are 4 other rooms other than the unlock that you generally want to go for. Heroism is a scroll that allows you to instantly kill out the boss room. You can see it right here. That's a heroism scroll. It basically allows you to immediately kill out the boss room. This you would normally use for 3 specific things. There is a astral spirit, which you tend to kill, a spirit fox that you tend to kill, and just high-level rooms. Basically, when the astral spirit and spirit fox can one-shot you, you should probably be using a heroism to get past those rooms so you don't have to deal with being one-shotted, because there are a lot of teams, even in late game high stats, around floors 18 to 24 that will occasionally have a spirit fox or astral spirit that could just one-shot you, and there's really nothing you could do about it since they have empowered, so it's going to immediately happen. In the case of the astral spirit, you can put a hero that has barrier start in first slot, but for the spirit fox, it's completely random and there's almost no way to really avoid it. So those are the kind of things you generally want to throw your heroism for once you reach the later delves where they can actually one-shot you. Other than that, you just tend to save it for floors 25 plus if you're bothering to go that far, or 20 plus, and just use it on difficult floors in general just because they're going to be harder to do. So those are the main things I use those heroisms for. Don't use them immediately. If you're on like floor 6 getting a heroism, you should not be using it. You should be saving it for when they actually start getting harder. As far as the haste, this is one that's questionable if it's actually worth getting. Basically, what it does is if you win the battle, you get 1 additional sigil. But of course, it costs 1 sigil to play the battle. The whole point of taking haste is you would take it for about the first 10 to 15 floors, maybe a little bit deeper if you really wanted to. But essentially what this allows you to do is have a chance of finding a Valraven. That battle where you get that 1 sigil from does have a slight chance for Valraven. It's about a 1 in 4, 1 in 5, but it could just be that 1 battle that gets you those 2 extra sigils. So overall, it technically gives you nothing, but it does have the chance of giving you a Valraven. So that's the whole reason for taking haste. It just brings you slightly closer to eventually finding the Valraven. Other than that, luck is the absolute best one that you could possibly find. So if you find one that is really nice, and you should definitely report it. It is basically 2 Doom kills, which is insanely good because that's basically 4 battles for free instantly with only 1 sigil. So very, very powerful and by far the best one out of all of them. And power basically gives you higher stats. Over on your menu over here, you can see a bunch of the extra stats that we're getting. Basically, what a power does is it adds +1 to each of these, not to the total value, but to this number on the bottom here. Basically, this number on the bottom requires a certain amount of +1s in order to reach the next one. For example, the very first one only takes 1, then to get to 2, you need 2, then to 3, 4, and so forth. So, for example, we're currently on 6 on this one, so we need to get 7 of them in order to reach 7. And that's basically how it is for every single one. So this is one that is at 7, so we need to get it to 8 in order to get it to 8, and so on and so forth for each one. This one's at 8, so we need to get it to 9. And a power basically adds +1, not to this number, but to this number on the bottom. And it does it for all 4 of them, which is why it's so powerful. There's other ones that just do it for 1 of them, but power does it for all 4, so it's worth reporting back. And that was all of them, right? Wait, 1 second. Did I forget one? Did I forget one? No, that was all of them. But yeah, those are the only 5 that you ever really need to do. Every other scroll that you could possibly find is essentially useless as far as the room-specific ones. And you basically just scout them out, tell your guild, and then go do whatever the path is for every single one so that you waste as few sigils as possible so that you get as many Doom kills as possible and then easily get all the rewards for the given day. Leaderboard's pretty horrible for this game mode, so I wouldn't really advise it. It is not worth it for the most part. So don't even bother because the top of the leaderboard is probably going to be taken every single time, and the rewards that you get for mid-range is just abysmal. So you spend more gems than what you would even get back, so don't even bother with that. But yeah, Tower of Doom, definitely a fun game mode. Probably my favorite one, actually, since it actually requires communication with your guild, and I don't know, I find it the most enjoyable. Could just be because we haven't had it too many times. One other thing I wanted to go over, we do have the Doom, it's pretty useless though. But as far as the weapon, it's kind of a decent alternative if you don't currently have Yasmin's Pride. You might see me using that in Delves quite a bit, or not Delves, particularly in Tower of Doom. Probably even this week I'll be using it some when I show some of the teams and stuff too. But this is kind of an alternative to it, not exactly the same, but basically it gives a bunch of life to all of your allies, +2 per tempering level. So basically what this means is whatever that number is right there, just times that by 2. So it's +2 per tempering level, so that's going to be +6. So that's 36 life that's going to do to all allies. It gains 5 mana, and if the enemy has a Doom, then it will end up gaining 4 more mana to all of your allies. So basically that's going to be 9 mana whenever you're up against the Dooms. And for each purple enemy, it also gains 2 magic to all allies. So you'd be able to get quite a bit of magic that way as well. It's not like an excessively high amount, but if the enemy has 4 purples, it's going to end up being 8 magic for all of your allies, which can start stacking over time. As far as this weapon overall, I do feel like it's going to be more of a PvP weapon that within HP context teams than a Tower of Doom or Delve weapon or anything like that. But it could be an okay alternative if you really need those HP buffs for whatever reason because of the troops that you're using. Unfortunately, this particular week doesn't have too many things underneath purple that really boost ratio that well. But let's go take our tribute real quick, go over all the other events. So, other events this week. We have a lot of them. Tuesday is All Seeing Eye. Nothing really too special with that, though the most noteworthy thing about that is the weapon that is available for All Seeing Eye is the best weapon of any Delve weapon. It is the Jar of Eyes, and it's basically like a Mountain Crusher that has Summon. It's not exactly the same. Mountain Crusher still overall is slightly better than it, but there are specific instances, particularly Skull Spam teams with this in second slot, as well as Lust teams tend to use, and a few others, where you end up putting Jar of Eyes in second slot, and you basically just go from there and use it like a Mountain Crusher, very similar to it. But it's the best faction event weapon, so it's worth considering getting. On Wednesday, we're going to be getting the EXP pet, nothing really too special other than it looks cute. Thursday, we have Sorcerer hero class, which is among one of the worst hero classes in the game in the current state of the game. At one point, it was one of the best, but unfortunately these days, the biggest thing holding it back is it doesn't have half mana start, yet it's a casting-related hero class, and it's pretty outdated. Don't know if they're ever going to update it, but currently it's pretty bad. And other than that, this Friday we have 2 things. We're getting a new faction that's going to be bringing in the bleed mechanic. We're finally getting troops that are going to be having a 100% chance to bleed, and it's finally going to make the bleed mechanic, even though we've had it for like a little over a month now, it's finally going to make it a viable mechanic to actually use. So it's going to be fun to mess around with, and everything that comes with a new faction. And other than that, we're also getting a new Mythic this Friday that's going to have a triple stun, as well as function very similarly to that of a Ketras, except I believe Ketras will still be better, but it's basically going to be an alternative Ketras as a stun option. Anyways, other than that, Soulforge. Then we can go into teams. So, Soulforge. Only really noteworthy thing is Wardbreaker is available. Unfortunately, there's nothing purple related that will really help you with Delves this week. I mean, with Tower of Doom. But as far as into the future, definitely worth considering getting a Wardbreaker. It's the second highest mana cost troop in the game, but it's still pretty decent. It's a red, yellow, green. It does 18 explosions, which is about what a late game Gorgolfa ends up doing. And on top of that, it also does damage to all enemies, a pretty decent amount, not excessively high, but it gets most of its mana back every cast due to the fact that it explodes so much and uses 3 mana, so it's pretty much good to go off of that. It also ends up gaining 5 to a random stat every single time it does an extra turn, and if you get it onto magic, that's quite a bit additional damage, since he'll be able to get a total of 20 additional damage each time. It gets 5 magic if it's hitting all 4 troops, and overall a pretty decent troop. There are a lot of things that tend to be better than it in most contexts, like Infernus and just other damaging options, but there are times where you bring this out. Sometimes like Delves, PvP, stuff like that. Things normally when you're restricted on colors. So Tower of Doom and Delves probably, and Guild Wars, are among some of the better ones. The biggest downside he really has, and why Infernus and similar options tend to be used more, Ketras and stuff like that, is he is hard countered by Submerge. So if they have Submerge and or Barrier, he tends to be pretty hard to actually function against them, mainly because Submerge will dodge all the attacks, and Barrier, he doesn't have multi-hit other than on first slot, so Barrier is going to counter it if they have a easy way of placing Barrier very quickly. But overall, still a really nice Mythic to have. Probably about the 5th, 6th, or 7th Mythic to really get, maybe 4th. Really just depends if you're looking to try to get something like this. Normally, if you have an Infernus, he basically does the role of Wardbreaker, but there are restrictions like, let's say, green, for example, where you sometimes need a green troop that does something like this, and you can't use an Infernus for that, though for red and yellow it could. But anyways, that's pretty much the only thing worth crafting this week. Everything else, pretty much just ignore. So, let's go over some teams now, and go over all those. So speaking of Wardbreaker, there he is actually. We're going to start off with the Sorcerer class event. As I mentioned, we have a Sorcerer class event this Thursday. We will be restricted to Daemon Karkaroff troops, so that's all of these. I should have saved it. Let's see. Let's go bring it up real quick. So as far as all the troops you have to use, it'll be these. So just these 8, and your hero using anything. So of these 8, the obvious best one is Wall of Tentacles. So basically just spam 3 Wall of Tentacles into Black Manacle. You can also do this with literally any weapon or any troop that has 15 mana cost. So I just figured we throw it with a hero because might as well gain free hero XP. You can run it with Sorcerer or really any that you want. Doesn't really matter too much for the most part. I'll do it in PvP here. It's going to function a little bit less in PvP than it would during the actual event, but it should be good enough to still work. So essentially what we need to go do now is get 15 mana. We need this to be at full mana, and we need this to be at least 5 mana. And since we have that now, we can start getting our loop going and basically just win the game. So we'll throw this down, that will then get to full mana. We then throw this down, that then gets to full mana, as well as our hero. And then we just keep throwing our weapon or whatever we have here every single time we have full mana on it. And just make sure to take extra turns if there's any on the board. And then just keep looping this over and over and over again. You would need to cast this 3 times, of course, to get it all the way back, unless you just randomly get extra turn mana that will make it go higher. But if they don't really have too much board control, you can pretty much just infinitely keep going through these, never even need to worry about the board, and just keep going from there. Looks like we are going to get trolled a little bit because it is an actual PvP team that we're trying to run this against. But normally it's going to be a lot easier if you actually do this during the event itself. No! But yeah, during the actual event, there aren't too many things that will actually kill this thing out. Okay, that's a little bit too easy. That's a little bit too easy as well, but let's just do it on this one. This will be a little bit more realistic as to what would actually be during one of those events, like one of the mid-range battles, around like Battle 5 or so. But let's try this again. So once you have 15 mana, you throw that down, that gets the full mana. The other one gets the full. Looks like we have enchant there, so we have to get that 1 turn early, so might as well do that. And you basically just keep repeating this cycle until you win. That's essentially the whole team. You also have 25% reflects on these. Only real big issue with this team is if you do lose anything, it does not have a summon, so you might lose 1 point here or there. But it should get through pretty quick, and definitely really nice for just clearing out the lower battles, as you can see right there. But yeah, that's pretty much what you'd run for the Sorcerer class event, or something similar. You can also run Hero in first slot using Manged with the exact same strategy, using something like Titan if you need it to be a little bit safer. So yeah, pretty easy Sorcerer class event this time around. It wasn't as easy before because we didn't have any good options, but now they added Wall of Thorns, or Wall of Tentacles, so it's a lot easier now. Anyways, other teams. Do I really have to go take out MOAs? It's gonna make me have to take out MOAs, isn't it? Let's see, what do we have? So this was one of the ones I was going to run for the purple HP towards the later battles. I might be replacing out Sunbird, but the biggest issue with Sunbird is every single time it casts, it does die, so you lose all the HP boost ratio. But Def, still with its 1 to 3, so every 3 HP it has, it gains 1 additional damage. Still pretty decent. It's not like a 1-to-1 or anything like that, but it still ends up racking up a decent amount of damage that's worth using. The other aspect of it that's pretty decent is that it def marks all enemies. And other than the Doom itself and a few of those like pure purple battles for the Doom battle, most things can be def marked for the most part. So it tends to be pretty good against most of those battles, since not only would you have the chance of def mark killing it, you could also just simply kill it with its absurd amount of damage that it gets from all of its life. And you'd be able to get all your life with Yasmin's Pride. That is unfortunately one of those weapons that if you don't currently have it, there is no way to actually obtain it. There is another team I'll be going over in a second. But yeah, basically we just have the Herdmaster here to get rid of def marks. It'll also be able to accumulate us our mana. We have it set to +2 purple, +1 red, so we can get Herdmaster a little bit quicker, as well as Sunbird for if we really need to get desperate, but also just to give the +1 red, since we're actually going to have Perpetual Firestorm due to the Sunbird when using this team. And yeah, you pretty much just throw a few of these Yasmins, get all your HP you need, and then just keep casting Sunbird into def combo until you win. As far as the slightly more realistic one that people could have, that is Titan using Mountain Crusher, Rock Troll, Element Grim, and Infernus. There's a few other different ways that you could run this, but this is one of them. So basically, it's a infinite brown purple loop team. What we want to do first is immediately take a brown so they don't kill us, because they're going to have nearly one-shot range damage. So we could do that. You could also put your Rock Troll in first slot if you really had to. Since we are using Titan, and Rock Troll does count as a giant, we do gain half mana immediately for that as well, so he's already at full mana. We'll throw this down to redo our barrier if we needed it, but also just put more browns, which gives us more area to do our explosion. As I mentioned, we're basically going to have Perpetual Brown Storm this entire battle. We are occasionally going to get Red Storm whenever we get a kill, but apparently he's actually stunned right now, which is somewhat a bad thing because we actually need them to be burned, and they're not currently burned. Normally you'd be able to go and get our extra bit of damage. I guess we'll have to do another battle just to show it real quick. These were going to be easy kills anyways, regardless. But figures. Okay, never mind. We've got our burn there. We'll just get that down again. Get all of our mana from that. And basically just keep looping that until we win. Looks like we did miss there. I did do it on a board that had a little bit too little on brown. I feel like for the lower level ranges would be mostly what I'd be running. For the first few, we could probably just run a quick Dawnbringer, then start running this, and then start running into something like Yasmin's Pride by about the 10th floor or so, once the stats start getting a little bit more dangerous. But essentially, that's basically all we would have to do. Looks like a little bit unlucky throughout most of that, which is also one of my slight concerns with bringing it in too deep. It has the same problem on Purple Guild War days. The only thing that you can really do to try to fix that some is trying to get an Umber Wolf on here. But then you'd have to go with a different weapon. That'd be a little bit safer, and you'd also wouldn't really have too much of a mana generator at that point after you replace out both of these. But something like an Umber Wolf, or just to get that perpetual Purple Storm, would be one of the most consistent ways to make sure Elamagrim stays looping. But most teams don't necessarily have the room to put that on it. But yeah, basically anything around that should end up working. And just one more thing with Wall of Tentacles. I'm still going to be experimenting with this a lot. I feel like there's a lot of potential. Haven't tested too much with it, but for all I could tell, there's one of the other teams that should work somewhat decent with it. I like using it with Divinia just to make sure it constantly lives, so we can keep getting that 25% Skull Reflect. So basically here, we're just going to go immediately for Bronze Lock Pistol, get our mana, and go from there. Currently using it with Thief so that we do get a little bit of gold per turn, since this team doesn't naturally have a alternative method of gaining gold. One of the best ways to do that would be Leprechaun, but since we're using a different green-purple, not really much room for a Leprechaun on this particular team. But all we really need to do is start getting Divinia up. We'll probably actually went for that first just to get her mana, because her being up first is probably the most important, because it keeps our first slot alive, as well as just feeding everything the mana that it needs. So we'll take that for now. This will be armor that it needs to survive. That's unfortunately going to be 1 mana short of full mana. Generally, things divisible by 5 tend to work the best with it, though not necessarily, because you might get slightly off due to explosions and stuff. But if you're using like 2 of them, oh no, he died out. But if you're using 2 or 3 of them, it's definitely really important to be divisible by 5, because most of the mana accumulations we'll be gaining will be in increments of 5s. Well, it looks like we'll still be able to easily get this down. It's Yagwe Divinia. There's not much that it loses to for the most part, unless we really mess up. Just because it keeps gaining HP and then keeps gaining damage from that HP. So it's basically gaining everything it needs to live and do damage just from gaining HP. It seems like that tends to be pretty good in a lot of scenarios. Tower of Doom uses it a lot. PvP can use it in quite a few different situations. And pretty much any game mode that you really want to can theoretically get away with that. But anyways, there we go with the kill. As far as Wall, I'm still going to need to experiment more to see what exactly it might be used with. The biggest contender that it normally has, as far as what will be better than it, is probably Leprechaun these days, I would say. Leprechaun just makes every other green-purple look so much weaker sometimes, just because of how much mana it accumulates all at once, plus the gold bonus, and it's just somewhat decent. It doesn't really have the best of traits, but other than that, that's about the only thing, other than powered, of course, but other than that, that's like the only thing really holding it back. But anyways, guys, that's everything that I wanted to go over. Of course, we'll be going over the new Mythic, new Delve, and everything else as it comes out. If you still have any questions about Tower of Doom, I will be streaming that quite a bit tonight, as well as tomorrow night here on YouTube. So definitely make sure to check that out, as we will be going through all of Tower of Doom, actually playing it, and all that good stuff. But anyways, guys, I'll see you all later. If you still have questions, leave them below. And thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful week. Goodbye, everyone.